Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. We have got with us a YouTuber extraordinaire. And it's not me, because I'm new to all this, but we've got a dab hand. We've got one of the OGs of the watch community, the watch industry, and the guy who brings you dollar dazzlers and the dodgy AliExpress specials every so often when they have a sale or it's coming up for a festive period. So welcome to the show for his third or fourth appearance, Jody from Just One More Watch. How are you doing, sir?
Ricky, I am tremendous. How are you doing today? I think this might be my fifth appearance. How long have you been making this podcast?
It's coming up 5 years, nearly 500 episodes, and you usually appeared after a spring clean. We would find you behind the couch and we'd drag you on the show around about sort of April, May time. And then last year you were so busy that you decided you would join us in the height of Scottish summer, which doesn't really exist, but we tried our best. And we brought you back roughly 12 months later because we're now doing the video thing. People asked for it. We're still doing the audio. It's still there. The show notes are still tremendous, thanks to Miziel, but there is now that visual flair. And I have just noticed that I must have subconsciously ripped you off because my colour scheme is a little bit like
my colour scheme in the background. I mean, I do love the pink.
But Dave prefers brown, if you've seen what he wears usually. Hey, that was a colour joke, that was what he wears.
Ricky, nothing has changed. The tone is still where it was.
It's still in the gutter, where it firmly belongs. But we should probably start the show as we mean to go on, get the wrist checks out of the way. You're the guest, so you can tell us what you've got on the wrist today.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm wearing a watch that I bought last November, and it has become about as close to I get these days as a daily, which is another conversation we should have. Do you have a daily, or do we just have so many watches that's impossible? It's a Citizen Chronomaster. So this is their JDM Grand Seiko equivalent. I love it. It's got a handmade washi paper dial, amazing crystal, titanium coated. I haven't scratched it in 6-7 months of ownership. 80 grams, perpetual calendar, eco drive, high accuracy quartz. It is the time. And it makes anything else look a little bit stupid because it does all of that. Why would you want anything different from a watch? That's surely the point of wearing a watch.
So how often do you actually get the opportunity to wear your own watches or watches that are now in your watch box in your collection versus the problem I've got where I'm looking at the desk here and I've just got so many random watches just kind of lying around for reviews, for wrist checks, for all kinds of things.
This is the thing, isn't it? This is why I'm saying, do I have it daily? I used to wear the same watch more or less all of the time for forever. Until I started a YouTube channel. And now I barely get the chance to wear my own stuff. This one, I maybe wear it 50% of the time, or I wear my own watches 50% of the time and review watches, loaner watches, the watch of the week, whatever, the other half of the time.
Don't worry, we're not going to hold you to it. It was just a general question. But time for me to do my wrist check, and you might have seen it already, because it's a watch I've not had on the wrist for probably a month or two, and I feel pretty bad about it because it was my absolute favourite watch up until probably I got my Snoopy. No, until I got my Mad 1. And then I got the Daytona, and then I got the Snoopy. And trying to play with all the watches that I own in my own collection versus all the watches that come in for review and for us to check out, it is a difficult thing. So here is my wrist check. And this is the Orage Tourbillon 1, a watch that I fell in love with when I first got introduced to the guys a number of years ago. They came across to Scotland. You may have heard in a recent podcast I gave the story away. There was a Red Bar event. We were recording video back in the day. They came over, explained what they were all about. They had their Autark, they had their Meteorite dial, they had this, that and the other, the Array, and this is what they were working on. But they ran into problems getting the movements from a manufacturer. They decided instead of throwing in the towel and giving the game up, they would create their own, and the result was the Tourbillon 1. This one here I've had for nearly 2 years. I got it just before Dubai Watch Week 2021. I was the only person with it across there because I thought if I'm travelling to Dubai, everyone's going to have the best of the best. They're going to have the Richard Mille. They're going to have the Rolex Daytonas and the APs. I was the only person with this watch at the entire event. And I was quite happy about it because it's not a mega expensive watch. When this came out, it was under 10 grand. And the good news is they've actually managed to find some spare cases. In the back of the stock room, where they keep all their spares for servicing, upgrades, repairs, etc., they have found some cases and they are offering up to 30 lucky people the opportunity, if they wish, to go ahead and get one of these watches. Not on this funky rubber strap, which is not an Arage product. This was bought from eBay because it comes on a leather, and I'm not the biggest fan of leather. I'm more into rubber. Ask Dave about that. And probably the best thing about this watch is you can wear it this way, but a bit like a Reverso, there's a lot of fun happening on the back. And I've never seen a watch with this kind of blue waffle grid arrangement before. It just absolutely jumps off. I mean, the lighting in here isn't the greatest for the overhead shots, as you can see, but you can just look straight through there. You can see the logo that's been laser etched like a hologram just beside the winding crown, and it has been just fettled in every which way. Collaborating with various folks over in Switzerland, including Armin Strom, to do the finishing and the decoration. It is just an absolute masterpiece. And as I say, coming in at just under 10 grand, you really can't beat it. I know there are other tourbillons out there that are cheaper from China, and there are a couple more from Switzerland, but they do not stack up to this little guy here. And it runs plus 1 second a day with 904L stainless steel, which is what Rolex use and they call oyster steel because they have the trademark, the copyright and all that. So that's my wrist check for today, the Arage Tourbillon 1, and you can get one maybe if you check the show notes and jump across to their website.
Very nice, Ricky, very nice. Yeah, a lovely, lovely watch. Talking of lighting, how are you enjoying the transition from an audio podcast to an audio and a video podcast?
I like how this is going. So this is a podcast where I bring guests on to ask them questions and Jody just...
Well, you know, it's a loaded question, Ricky, because I used to get these Facebook messages from you, usually on a Monday. Hi, bud, how you doing? And I'd be like, hi, Ricky, I'm fine. And you'd be like, hey, your audio was pure shite in that last video you made, by the way. So I'm looking forward to returning the favour and saying your lighting was pish in that wrist shot. By the way, you need to sort that out.
Okay, I'll answer your question since you decided to lamp me right in the face with that one. How have I found the transition? It's not really a transition. I'll explain why for anybody that cares. And I know that we've got a lot of people that love doing photography. There's some people that are getting into YouTube. We've had co-presenters, guests on the show that started off as collectors, started on Instagram, and before you know it, now they're running successful YouTube channels with 30,000, 50,000 subscribers. The transition has been easier than I thought, touch wood, because I used to work in AV. I used to film music events. I did wedding photography and video for a number of years, covered cars, did all kinds of stuff. Any corporate, it didn't really matter, through to fitness and personal training. So the transition was fairly easy on that front. But being the person that's controlling the microphone, the background lighting, the overhead camera, the main camera, and making sure everything is running, there's no producer. There's nobody sitting at a desk here. Everything's controlled by me. So if I forget one thing, one key component, the show doesn't work. Either the audio doesn't get recorded, it's bad quality, or the video doesn't come through. So that was the scariest part. And also the amount of time it takes to set up the lights, do a test, play it back, go back, refine it, change it. And if anyone has seen the first 3 episodes, you might notice in the background, some of these things are different because I've been upgrading, a bit like yourself. I have new stuff over there. There's even a Terminator head, an endoskeleton skull sitting in the corner. So it's been a bit of a progression over the last couple of weeks. I've enjoyed it. I didn't know what the reaction would be from the audience. The people that listen to the podcast because they're travelling in the morning to work or coming back, they're at the gym, they're walking the dog, or they're doing the household chores, they have remained. And they're still checking out the show notes, and it's great. But we have got a new audience that has come along that have never listened to podcasts before in audible form only. And they've really taken to it, even though it's only been a couple of weeks. And the comments and the feedback we've had has been fantastic. So it's a bit of a hybrid show. The audio guys that are listening don't hear anything different. We're still talking as we normally do every year, but the people that want to see things instead of going back later on and checking out the show notes or doing it in addition to the show notes, they get to visually see the watches as we talk about it. And that's the way we want to continue it. We don't want to neuter what we've done before because it's successful and everybody really appreciates it. And we're very happy that we've got such a following that enjoy what we do. But we just wanted to move forward because everyone else seems to do video. I've got a background in video. I've got cameras. So why not?
Makes total sense. You're not replacing your original show. You're just kind of augmenting it and offering something in parallel. But I know what you're saying about having to switch everything on. I think there's 14 things I need to switch on, make sure they're fully charged, have batteries and in the right location before I sit down and do the first hello of the day. And if one of those things, if I've forgotten to charge a battery, I'm stuffed and I have to wait, or I have to go back and do it. So it's complicated and it never stops. You never stop. Your setup is never static. I'm trying to go 4K. I'm going to go 4K in the next month or so. And I realized that my camera could do it, but I didn't have 4K monitors in my computer. So how can I check the footage if I can't see it? So that was 2 new monitors. And then I was like, oh, I need to buy a monitor stand, and just bought a new 2x macro lens.
Oh, good. Dave can use that for his OnlyFans.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to keep up, and it's keep up. It's not stay ahead. It's if you want to keep up with everybody now, you need to continuously improve what you do and spend money to do it.
Yeah, the money part, that was the difficult part. My accountant wasn't happy with me at all.
Yeah.
I managed to repurpose a few things. The overhead camera is one of my old Panasonic GH5s. The camera I'm using on the main shot just now is my Nikon Z9 or Z9, which is an 8K camera. Ooh. And I'm using it for 1080p at the moment and 4K in the future. I know, absolute waste. 1.8, 50mm lens, all the coloured lights in the background. And you'd said there about turning things on, making sure this is activated and that's activated. Well, if you get yourself remote sockets and all kinds of stuff, you can alter the colours, the intensities from the safety of behind the keyboard instead of having to go around and check everything. But even I have got a checklist because it's all new. It's all absolutely new, and I don't want to muck anything up, especially when somebody like you is coming on here and giving me your precious time, because you're doing more videos a week than anybody. You're doing more than WatchFinder. I don't know where you find the time, because you've got a job, you've got a kid, you've got one of those wife things as well.
I do, and I think they're both downstairs somewhere at the moment. I got special permission to record this one, meaning that she has to process, my wife has to process the son and get him off to daycare. But this is my job now. I work part-time, very casually, very infrequently now at the Opera House, but YouTube is my job. So I've been able to take it more seriously over the last 12 months, put more into it, and try and, as I said, improve everything. But it does take my working week getting 3 videos out, but wouldn't have it any other way. The best job I've ever had, but it can get expensive. And we spoke on Monday earlier this week. I've been busy since Monday. I decided I had too many watches in the house, and I managed to sell 24 of them in 24 hours. I set myself the challenge, and I succeeded. I got rid of 24 watches, and the place is still covered in watches.
Speechless. But how many? How quickly? What ones did you get rid of?
I looked around on Monday night this week, and I had 2 watch boxes of 20, all full, 2 12s, all full, a 10, all full, another 12, all full. That's like 80 plus. Plus I had cupboards full. So I thought, if it hasn't been on the wrist for 12 months, I'll put it up for sale. And I sell a lot on a Facebook group. I buy a lot on the same Facebook group. Shout out to the Australian Affordable Watch Forum. And they pretty much bought everything I listed over the last day or so.
Give us some highlights then. Which watches did you have? What did you get rid of?
I sold the Signum CUDA full lume dial that killed off the Lume War series, because it is just the most insane lume. And I've had the hump with it because it killed off the Lume War series. So I sold it. I sold a bunch of Paganis. Didn't get an awful lot from my Paganis. The resale on those isn't great, especially when it's no links and no box and just bits and pieces. I just clearing the cupboards, trying to sell. I sold some Vostoks. Haven't really been feeling the same way about Vostoks over the last 18 months or so for some reason. So the Vostoks were just sitting in a box. And I thought, I can buy them again at some stage if in the future if I want to. But send them out to some new homes and free up a bit of cash at the same time for, perhaps a little business venture that I'm involved in at the moment.
I love a little bit of foreshadowing on the show. It's as if you've done this kind of thing before, Jody.
It's as if I came on with an agenda, Ricky, almost.
Well, we've been hyping this kind of thing up for maybe 2 years. I think that's when you first broached the subject of doing your own thing. But we'll get to that, because at Scottish Watches, we do it a little bit differently. We work with brands, because right at the beginning, people did say, why don't you do the merch stuff? Why don't you do your own watch line? And I thought I could, but I also know, having listened to everybody that does that, how in-depth a process it is and how much energy, time, prototyping, finding the right people. It's insane that the way that you can get something that looks really good, and then when you get a box of 1,000 of them, they ain't quite the same. So I understand what goes on behind the scenes. But anyway, we'll come to your business franchise opportunity idea, multi-level marketing pyramid schemes at the end of the show.
That's it, pyramid scheme.
We'll talk about what you've been up to in the last 12 months because, yeah, you haven't stayed still. You have adapted. You have a little one who's getting bigger day by day. Started off at 36 mil, probably at 42 now.
Yeah.
And you've managed to keep the content good, if not great, because what I find is when people get into a bit of a rut, it becomes formulaic. And then it becomes cookie cutter and the passion drips out and suddenly they're just doing it because, like you say, it's a job. But watching your videos, as I have done from before the podcast, even when I first got into watches, I remember messaging you before I went to SIHH in like 2018, something like that. And I said, I'm going to be filming some bits and bobs because that's my background. Would you like some footage? And you didn't tell me to pee off. You were very nice and humble about it and said, it's not really the kind of thing we do.
Yeah, I would have difficulty integrating that into the channel format currently. But thank you very much for your kind and generous offer, was probably what I said.
We'll keep your details on file and we might get in touch with you in the future if a position becomes available. I think that's roughly what you said.
Something like that.
And I thought, fuck that guy, I'll just start my own podcast and then I'll drag him on and I'll give him a slap. So you're here. So tell us what's been happening in the last 12 months. What's been happening with the channel? You've upgraded certain things. You're going to be upgrading more. And what have you seen within the diverse collector community, the independents? Personally, I've seen some of the micro brands starting to up their prices little by little, same as Omega, same as Rolex, but there are still some dollar dazzlers out there to be had. So give us the run through.
What have I done personally? I'm still in the same house. I've had the same backdrop for almost 3 years now. And if you're a real kind of spotter of the channel, I think I've been through 3 backdrops in the first 3 years, and then I've been in the same place for the last 3 years. So still in the same house, still loving where I live in Sydney. I'm no longer studying. 10 years of full-time study in the background, the last 5 of which were, in the background of YouTube, or I think YouTube was in the background of them according to my scholarship form anyway. That's all over. You can call me Dr. Jody if you want to, but you don't have to. I'll let you off because we're mates. But yeah, just trying to cope with a small baby in the house, working from home, working full-time, and still doing the Opera House for a bit of social activity. Because when you work from home, there's days when I don't leave the house. And if I do leave the house, I go to the post office, which is about 150 meters down on the same street. I live in Smith Street. I don't technically have to leave Smith Street because everything I want, curry takeaway shop, burger takeaway shop, post office, newsagent, and petrol station are all in the same street. Why do I have to go anywhere? But just enjoying life, enjoying being an old, new dad.
Vintage, new old stock.
Yeah, at this late stage in the game, or relatively late stage in the game, but he's amazing. He's fantastic fun. He's not a wee boy. He was never a wee boy. He was chunky from the beginning, and he has continued to grow at a pace. I've been enjoying him, trying to balance everything out as well. He sleeps most nights now, but it wasn't really the case for the first 14, 15 months. So you're trying to deal with continuous sleep deprivation, which at this late stage is probably easier to deal with, I think, than if I was younger. But yeah, channel's going really well. I took on a production assistant part-time about 6 weeks ago now. I figured I need a bit of help, especially with certain other business ventures coming up in the near future. I would need a bit more of my time back. So I brought in a guy. My wife works in the arts. She's a screenwriter, so has lots of friends who are into film, theatre, and so on in Sydney. So one of them put out a call. I did a little brief, YouTube channel, Sydney-based, must speak Scottish, must be enthusiastic, punctual, reliable, social media savvy. And I got one applicant. I got one guy send me an email. So oddly enough, he got the job. He's not going to watch this, so I can talk about him. He thinks he's Martin Scorsese. He's trying to get way ahead of the game. He wants watches dangling on bits of string and in fish tanks. And I'm like, no, just calm down a bit. Just calm down. Watch last week's video. Do that. Thanks very much. But no, he's really good. He's brought, a fresh pair of eyes to what I do. And he says, no, this light should be there. You want a baffle here, change up your mic position, do this, do that. And I've just nodded along. I mean, as I say, he's half my age, but I'm just like, okay, and write this down and okay. And
He's saying to you, okay, boomer.
he's pretty much. So I did some new shots to the B-roll, bought one of those sliders, a remote control slider that does kind of fancy pan shots as well.
Don't mention that because that's the next thing I've been eyeing up. I thought that would look really cool.
They're really cool. They are really cool. They're not expensive. Battery-powered sliders that work off an app. So I bought a slider, got that 2x macro, which I'm going to tinker around with this week. Yeah, hopefully just keep things moving forward. So I'm as happy as I can be with the content I'm putting out. 4K coming in a couple of weeks' time, I think. I'm going to make this shift and try and get a bit ahead of myself, try and get more organized, because I've been hand to mouth really for the last 6 years. 3 videos a week is a lot. And I tend to be working on Saturday's video on a Friday, or at best Sunday's video on a Friday, which is no way to live. It adds a little bit of panic, unnecessary panic.
What about watches? What's the industry been like? Have you noticed a change? Have you noticed the pricing changing? How has the supply chain been? Because it was terrible last time we spoke. People couldn't get crystals. It was difficult getting straps. What is the landscape looking like now in 2023?
You mentioned earlier on that you noticed that micros were getting a little... See, the micros, when I first started this channel about 6 years... This channel, as this isn't my channel. I'm on your channel today. First started my channel about 6 years ago. Micros were cheap. Micros were amazing value compared to the big brand stuff. And I think you're right, whether supply chain issues have had more pressure on them because they don't have the economies of scale that big brands do, or whether people are getting a little bit greedy, having now established themselves on the micro scene. Maybe they're thinking that, they've got a certain base level of customers that will buy anything they put out at any price. But it seems to have swung back a little bit in favor of the big brands over the last 12 months. Again, for one of those reasons, perhaps it's economies of scale, perhaps it's price squeezing at either end. But some of the, it's the Swiss group, it's the Swatch group. Terrifying value you get from a Swatch group product these days. Swiss made, those Powermatic 80 movements, and stuff that's not very expensive. Whereas micros are still using off-the-shelf Seikos or Miyotas and charging more money than you're getting something Swiss for these days a lot of the time. So, yeah, I found that with some reviews. I've said no to more than I've said yes to. I've been saying no more frequently these days because of price concerns that I have at my end.
It is something that stuck out to me when I've had press releases through from some brands, and I've seen them at $695 when maybe a year ago they were $4 or $3. And there hasn't been much material changes from what I can see. And these are brands that are producing everything out in the Far East. And the pricing out there hasn't dramatically changed from what I can tell. Obviously, your Omegas and your Rolexes, they love a good price increase. They try and put a couple in every single year. And we've spoken recently in the show a number of times about the fact that a Speedmaster is now a 7K watch in the UK when it used to be 3.5, 4.
I did a video on Tudors the other day. I did a kind of triple comparison between Black Bay 58, Ranger, and Pelagos 39. And it made me look at the prices of them, the current prices. And I distinctly remember when the Black Bay 58 came out, it was 4,250 over here, 4,250 Aussie. It's now 5,440 or something. So it's gone up 20% in 5 years. Now, I know inflation has probably had some reason, some part to play in that, but that's a chunk of money to go up for exactly the same watch. So are we being squeezed as consumers? Absolutely. Is somebody making more profit? Definitely. But where is that profit being made? Is it the suppliers? Has materials gone up? Who knows? But yeah, everything's more expensive than it was.
So who would you say then are still doing great value for money? Which brands have bucked the trend and are still being pocket friendly, doing the dollar dazzlers, as you used to say?
Yeah, I mean, Orient, when I first reviewed the Orient Kamasu, it was around $200 maybe 4 years ago. It's still $200. It's like the one thing that hasn't crept up in price. So there are still some Japanese brands and the big Swiss brands. I see even the PRX has gone up recently. That used to be a $500 Aussie watch, and it's now a $550 Aussie watch on rubber strap. So they've turned the screw somewhere. But yeah, some of the Japanese brands, Orient particularly, is still as cheap as it was 4 or 5 years ago, I think. So, look around, watch some old videos, find some old web pages, find out what the prices were a few years ago, and then see if you can find those prices today.
I think the guys at Nodus are still doing really good stuff. And is it Elshan over at Zelos? His prices have been good.
Yeah, his prices are always good because he sells out every time. He's got another drop this weekend, I believe. And there's always a kind of, you see people positioning themselves to get ready for 1 a.m. Australia time when he does his drops, desperately trying to click on the mouse and get one of their products. And then there's the usual backlash the next day for those who are unlucky. And then there's the flippers who try and capitalize on other people's misfortune and their good fortune. But that's one of the microbrand sales models, I guess, is scarcity. And where do you think they learned that from? I have no idea.
I wonder, and it's interesting you say that about people flipping watches and flipping microbrand watches, because here in the UK, Rich at Studio Underdog has actually been on a vigilante mission through eBay and different places looking for folks selling watches they've bought, they've managed to get an allocation for but haven't received yet. And he's managed to correlate the username and people that have ordered. And he's gone through and cancelled and refunded and then put pictures in his Instagram story saying, these are the bad people.
What a guy. I was delighted for him when I saw how successful his recent launch, what are you calling it, a relaunch, an order was for his watches. Nice guy. And clearly he's put the work in over the last couple of years. He's found a niche. He's extracted the maximum possible from one watch design very cleverly. And yeah, I think he took 3,500 pre-orders. Good for the man. Very, very good and a nice guy.
He is one of the nicest dudes in the whole industry. Met him a couple of times. He's been on the show a number of times. I've got one of his, it was the second batch drop of the watermelon that I managed to get, because the first one just disappeared, it evaporated as soon as it came out. But you're right, he's got a winning formula, and I wouldn't say he's hooting it out because he doesn't release a new colour dial every week, every month. It's every so often, and there's a thought behind it. He could just chuck random colours on there, but he doesn't. And we have got one of his watches in our charity auction that perhaps around about the time that you're seeing and hearing this episode, that will be happening. And this is a one of one, and it's incredible. So we owe him, along with all the people that have helped out with this charity auction, huge debt of gratitude, because they have really pulled out all the stops to get some amazing watches put together for us that hopefully will generate a decent bundle of cash for a very worthy cause. But a worthy cause is when somebody decides to save money, keep it for themselves. Charity begins at home, and they end up going to AliExpress, but then blowing up more money because they found more bargains because of your videos.
Yeah.
So what has the landscape been like over there? Who are the current heavy hitters? Has it changed? Are these names that you mention in your videos, are they just made up? Is it the same people behind the scenes and they're just picking random words?
I am unconvinced as to who owns what behind the scenes, even after, 4 or 5 years now, well down the AliExpress rabbit hole. When you see the Pagani official store, the Pagani store official.
It's a bit like the life of Brian, the People's Front of Judea.
Yeah, the Judea's People Front. You're like, well, how can you all be the same company if you're not stocking the same products? How come you've got the red one, you've got the blue one, you've got the black one? So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. And I've had that, my own experience when I've been setting up this brand this year, contacting what you think are factories, but it turns out they're not factories because they're just getting bits and bobs made up from elsewhere. So I think unless you are Chinese national, unless you are very much part of the watch industry over there, I think we're just guessing as to who owns what and what the relationships between each of the companies really are. Yeah, I thought you were going to segue when you were talking about charity. I thought you were going to talk about the Shitbox Rally.
The Shitbox Rally? Is that Fears and Casio G-Shock thing that went on?
Yes, that's that thing. Mr. X and I entered a charity car rally over here in May. We had actually got entry for the previous year's rally, the previous year's autumn rally, but had a baby, so it wasn't really politically correct for me to go, politically expedient to go at that time of year. So we rolled over to this year, and we managed to raise 31,500 Aussie dollars for the Cancer Council of Australia. And the vast majority of that was thanks to the generosity of the watch community. So we put in 2.5 each, which took us to our minimum raise of 5,000 Aussie, because they like you to raise 5,000 Aussie if you're a team.
What's that in freedom dollars?
What's that in freedom dollars? Probably about, the exchange rate's about 67 US cents to the Australian dollar at the moment. So if we raised 30, then it was, 21, 22.
That is damn good. That is impressive. So how did it go? Did the car break down? Did it explode? Anything cool happen?
The car was amazing. I bought one car that's so rusty, it's still parked outside Mr. X's factory unit somewhere in Western Sydney. The second car I bought was a Mercedes, one owner from new, amazing. It's still like old school 90s Mercedes when it was, everything is just solid. I'm amazed this 24-year-old car still feels really tight, really good. People we bought it from donated the money back to us. So they gave us the price that we paid for the car back to our charity page. So incredible generosity from them.
Now that's cool. That's a good part of this story.
That's a really nice part. We found that out. I got a text message from the guy halfway through the rally when we were camped in the middle of nowhere. Mark from Long Island Watches, super generous. He gave us 1,000 Aussie dollars, for no reason other than because he's a really nice guy and was super generous. And so many individual donations, big and small. It was just amazing. So about 15 grand. So about over half of the money came from individual donors from the watch community. I made a couple of videos about it. The response was amazing. People were fantastic. So thank you again if you donated, or even if you just watched one of the videos I made. We'll do it again at some point. We'll do it in a couple of years. I've still got the Mercedes parked outside. It's going nowhere. And now I'm itching to buy another 3 old Mercs. I can't help myself. I'm going to end up with as many cars as I have watches, or I would if I could.
But then you're just going to have to jump onto the buy, sell section, the marketplaces, and ditch them all because they're bigger. And the benefit you've got, which I absolutely hate you for, is in Australia, you don't have the weather, the climate, and the shitty road salt that the Scottish government use over here that dissolves everything. I had an imported MR2 because the UK didn't have the turbo version, wasn't undersealed, wasn't protected. As soon as it landed in Scotland, after one winter, it looked like it was going to fall to bits. So I absolutely hate the government here for that one thing. A few other things, but that one thing mainly. And that's why I always try and buy cars from England, because it's not as aggressive, the formulation they use there. And then you look at Australia in the outback, and they've got these cars from the 40s, 50s, 60s. There's not any rust.
I scrapped cars in the UK that were less than 10 years old because of the rust and because they wouldn't pass an MOT because of rust holes. And over here, my car is 18 years of age, and it's not even halfway through its lifespan, I don't think. Not a speck of rust anywhere on it. That Mercedes, no rust anywhere on it. Yeah, you're right. But the flip side of that is, if a car lasts twice as long, it depreciates half as quickly. So you're paying a lot more for an old car than you would if you were in the UK.
But enough of the car chat, back to the watch chat.
Could we not do a whole podcast on car chat? Please, next time.
We drip feed car chat into the show along with YouTube stuff, cameras, video, audio. It's a whole mix and mash. We pull all the things that people are interested in, mainly all the things I'm interested in, and people come along for the journey just to laugh at all the stupid shit I get up to and get involved in. Because if I do it, then you can laugh at me and you don't have to do it yourself, Monkey see, monkey don't have to do. But let's move back to watches, and I think it's probably time that you do tell us about the new endeavour, the thing that you've teased for a couple of years. You have been kind of coming up to it, but you wanted to do it right. You didn't want to rush in, and too many people, they do rush in, and we've seen a million Kickstarters appear and fail, or get their first watch out, and then it's that whole, how do we do the second album? And we've also seen some people grabbing the money and running with it. So we really do hope that this doesn't Hampton right here.
No, yeah. I reviewed another watch from somebody over 12 months ago, and they have stopped replying to my emails. I think they've stopped replying to everybody's emails as well. So I'm hoping that doesn't, it's not a Hampton Mark II, and that they're just experiencing some difficulties and delays in their watch at the moment. But yeah.
Would that be a watch company with 3 numbers at the beginning of it?
No, it wouldn't.
Do you want to divulge potentially who we're talking about?
Oh yeah, this is a Indonesian YouTuber, Adrian, who got in touch with me and got me to review his Legato Diver, a guitar-inspired watch, because he's a big guitar guy. That was last April, and people are still waiting for their watches, and he's no longer replying to my messages. So
Well, we've named a number of different brands every time you've come on the show. There was Michael Seals, there's been obviously Ross at Hampton, who did a bit of a runner, although seems to still pop up on my Facebook in Messenger. So he's still around, he's still using social media, but not for the reasons that people want him to. And then there was another watch brand that I got added to a group, 220 Watch. And I don't know what the story was there, but yeah, there's just been a number of people that are a bit shady.
yeah, and I've had another one, Richard Legrand watches. I think he's disappeared as well. He started a second brand just before Christmas and then has gone off radar. So people, it is difficult to maintain. It's like anything. It's like YouTubing or podcasting or whatever job you've got. It's difficult to maintain a flow. It's difficult to come up with the second album, the third album, the fourth album. And some people don't have their hearts in it and disappear after one or two watches. And
Well, let's talk about your first album then, Jody. It's been many years in the making.
I talked about doing this. It's been the logical thing for me to do is to start my own brand. I've spent 5-6 years now, plowing a narrow furrow, affordable watches. If I can't come up with something that's half decent and it's still affordable, then, that there's an issue. But I'd never done it before because I'd always been too busy and I didn't have the time and whatever to put into it. So I've got a business partner and he is a proper businessman. The two of us met through watches about 2.5 years ago. We became friends. And last year, we began to talk about doing a brand together. A year ago, we set up the company structure. Like I said, he's a proper businessman. I'm the front end of the pantomime horse. He's the back end. He's logistics and warehousing and sales, and employed a designer. I'm not going to do it ourselves because, I could show you some sketches that I sent the designer. They're not pretty, but a guy I know designs a lot of the biggest and most successful microbrands. Then had the mood board, exactly what we wanted, had a number of meetings, and then a number of revisions with the designer, got what we were happy with, and sent it out to 3 different factories to prototype. So not just picking the first one. The first set of prototypes came back in and they were okay. The second set of prototypes came back in and they were good. The third set of prototypes came back in though, and they were fantastic. So we have got the watch that we wanted to get. But, it's one thing having all the right specs for the right price. It's another thing how the thing actually wears on your wrist. So a couple of weeks each, wearing these watches every day, making sure that they were comfortable, making sure that they all held together. So we're at the second round of prototype stage with factory number 3. Hopefully within 60 days, we'll have a second round of prototypes back and we're getting everything ready to launch. So got a website on the go, email marketing, because I've been gathering an email list. So if you signed up for my email list 3 years ago, you haven't heard from me, but don't worry, you'll be hearing from me soon enough and regularly enough as well, as I desperately try and get you to buy one of these watches. But we're trying to do a really good value watch, all the right specs, wears fantastically, but at the right price.
Okay, well, do you want to tell us a little bit more about it? Is it a dive watch? Is it 100 meters, 300 meters, bracelet, rubber strap? What's going on?
It is a super legible tool diver. We wanted to make something that was really tooly, kind of no nonsense. A size that is suitable for people who like larger watches, but also wears really nicely for guys or even ladies with slightly smaller wrists. We made sure the lug to lug, we did that Seiko trick where they have big watches, but if you have a short lug to lug and you get the case profile right, then it wears sweetly. On the fly adjustable clasp, H-like bracelet. We're in a revision to try and make sure that we get that one right, because the first one was a bit of a hair nipper, and there's nothing worse than a watch that takes your hairs off your arm. Unless, of course, you shave your arms, Ricky, then, you wouldn't have that problem. I do occasionally. All the right specs, good color, great legibility, plenty of anti-reflective coating, plenty of lume, of course, and hoping to do all of that for $299 US plus shipping, which is like 5 years ago's price. It used to be $299 was, the benchmark for your microbrand dive watch, and now it's $399, even more than that. You were talking about $600 odd US for micro divers these days. So we're trying to bring 2018's pricing structure back to 2023.
I like that. That's good. That's honest value for money. And when are we likely to see this? Are you going to be doing a Kickstarter? Are you going to be doing pre-orders? How's it going to function?
Yeah, First Watch will do pre-orders, hoping that I have earned a little bit of a reputation and a good name within the watch community, and people will trust me with their money and trust me to deliver a product when I say I'm going to deliver a product. That's what the business partner is there for. He will make sure that all happens. A 4-week pre-order period at $299, and then if you want it after that, the price goes up a little bit, but we will not be employing the scarcity model. We will be employing the, if you want it, you can click 2 buttons and buy it model. So we will over-order stock, have that on hand here in Sydney. My business partner just happens to have a warehouse and logistics staff, so that'll all be dealt with there. So 4 weeks of pre-orders. As soon as these prototypes come back, if they're as good as the first set of prototypes, then we're off and running. I'll make a couple of videos about it, including why we chose that factory. We thought it was really interesting going to multiple different options to see, you said the same design, the same brief, the same set of specifications to 3 different factories, and you get 3 different products back from them. Plus, I've organised some of my contemporaries and peers to do reviews as well, so I'll be sending some units around the world.
What were the discrepancies? What were the differences that you found between these different places? What were the gotchas?
The first one gave us what we asked for, but it was a little bit too thick, and the bracelet end link fit was dreadful. You know, you look down at your wrist and all you could see was metal end links. Just didn't get that fit at all right. And if they're sending that to you, and then you go back to them and say, hey, we didn't like the bracelet, and they were like, oh yeah, we saw that. Well, why did you send it to us?
Why did you send it?
Why didn't you do something about it? We've asked for a textured dial, just a little bit of texture to break up the dial a bit. There wasn't nearly enough texture from factory number 1. Factory 2, bracelet was much better, but they didn't read the brief. The hands were too narrow, so they cocked up the hand size and they put a glossy ceramic bezel insert on it, whereas the entire watch is brushed. There are no polished surfaces on there at all. Factory 3 said to us, hey, we can make this a bit slimmer. We can get this down to 12.5 if you want. And we said, yes, please. And Factory 3 actually changed our lug design from what we had given them, but they made a much better watch as a consequence. Factory 3, I think, are more experienced at manufacturing watches, and they gave us what we didn't know we wanted, but we actually did want. So yeah, Factory 1 probably gave us the watch that was truest to our original brief, and you're relying on other people's knowledge, especially for your first watch. They made a better watch than we had given them. So yeah, very, very happy.
And it's this kind of behind the scenes information that's what listeners and viewers are after, because it gives them more of an understanding, because people think it's easy. Everybody thinks everything else in the world is easy until they give it a shot themselves, and that's when they can see all the hurdles and the obstacles that are in everybody's way, and why these things sometimes cost so much money and take so much time to actually produce. And speaking of time for production, when are we likely to see them landed?
Oh, I hope to have the second round of protos back within the next 60 days. So where are we now? We're in July, launching by the end of September at the latest.
That's not bad. And I hear that you might just bring one in your travel bag when you come back to Scotland.
Yes, my flights are booked. I'm coming back to Scotland I think we leave on the 10th of October, but the only way I could get my wife back to the UK to spend 2 weeks with my family is if we went to Italy for a week on the way over. So that was the kind of the carrot. That was the sweetener. So we're actually flying from Sydney to Rome, few days in Rome, then the Amalfi Coast, and then flying into Manchester because my sister is down. My sister and my dad are both in Yorkshire, so we'll spend a few days with them, and then I've got about 10 days on the ground in Scotland. So hoping beyond all hopes to catch up with you, Ricky, finally, to meet face to face. Maybe you and your lady friend.
Oh, Jody, that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me on this podcast. That's nice. Well, I'm sure we can figure out some things to do. Usually when people come to Scotland and they email me in and say, look, coming along, what are you and Dave up to? Any chance of meeting? It's difficult. And also, we have to become the tour guides because these people don't know Scotland. And am I right in thinking that you used to be a tour guide?
I used to be a tour guide. I worked as a tour guide at Sydney Opera House for 3 years, and I loved it. What a privilege that was, showing people around that incredible building with the headphones, captive audience, 35 people. Hello and welcome to Sydney Opera House. Pretty much that was it. That was my routine every day. So yeah, that was great. But you will not need to tell me where to go. I've been to the Barras. I know that's what you were going to suggest anyway.
You have been listening to this show. I wasn't actually going to suggest that. I was going to suggest that potentially we organise some kind of Scottish Watches or a Red Bar meetup, depending what's happening. Maybe get a few folks together, not hundreds and thousands of your adoring fans from the homeland, but a select curated amount of people that perhaps could get to see the watch as well. And obviously we would record something live and in person, because there's always too many stories to get out of Jody, and we're almost out of time in this episode of the podcast, and it feels like we just pressed record about 5 minutes ago there. So anything else you want to finish off with before we have to let you go? Because what time is it over there? It's like nearly midnight here.
Oh no, it's 9:30. I've got to, I'm not going to have a fun day. I bought 20 post bags yesterday. I'm going to have to go and write 20 post envelopes and post those watches that I sold yesterday. So my day will be spent at the dining room table, sending watches, bubble wrap and stuff and shipping it out. And I've got myself into trouble before when I've sold too many watches at once and I've sent the wrong watches to the wrong people. So I'm going to have to be super careful to make sure that you get the watch that you actually bought and paid for yesterday. So no, that's my day today. And I'll probably try and record a video or two later on. I've got bits and pieces. I've got some intros recorded. I'm going to rip a Citizen to bits later on because I paid far too much money for it and it's rubbish. So that's my plan. I'll have an extra couple of coffees and then I'll get stuck into a Citizen a bit later on this afternoon.
Sounds good. Well, before we let you go, and for my own personal information and knowledge, what should I be looking out for with this whole YouTube thing that we're now doing? Is there any gotchas? Has anything like changed in the last little while with the algorithm that they talk about? Any hints and tips?
The mystical algorithm. Well, you're stuffed because I think Shorts is now what YouTube are promoting, and everybody's trying to do short videos. And, you can turn an hour-long podcast into an hour-long video podcast, but I don't know how you turn it into a 1 minute short. I'm struggling with that in my head at the moment. What do I do that's a minute long and relevant? Because I've been contacted by a million companies. Hey, we'll turn your videos into shorts. I'm like, no, you won't. You'll turn my videos into 1 minute sections of pure mush, because how do you turn a 10, 12 minute video with a narrative arc and a beginning, a middle and an end into a 1 minute short? You don't. You're just going to turn it into words and pictures. So if you can work out how to turn a podcast into a short, then you'll make a fortune, Ricky.
And that's one thing we're not going to do. That is something people spoke to me quite recently about. They said, how are you going to take the podcast and make it suitable for YouTube? And I said, I don't care. This isn't going to be clickbait. This isn't going to be starting off going, oh my God, this crazy thing happened. How are we going to fix this problem? None of that bullshit. Because recently, when I was on the starting grid for the Gumball 3000 that launched from Edinburgh, and we managed to get access thanks to Shmee150, shout out to you, Tim. When I started watching the videos of, not him, he was brilliant, he did not do this, but all these other morons, like etc. I might bleep that out so people don't know what I said. But these morons that were creating YouTube content, and it was like, oh my God, my Lamborghini broke down and this happened and that happened. And I watched a couple of them because I wanted to see about the Gumball, and there was nothing to do with this alleged problem that they fictitiously created themselves for likes, clicks and clickbait. And we're not going to do that with the podcast. This is all about stories. This is all about knowledge, information, and we are not going to jeopardize what we have grown and built up over the past 500 episodes nearly in 5 years. We want to put out documentary quality audio, apart from obviously when me and you speak, but everybody else we want to do that with, and it to remain good. We're not chasing algorithms, we're not chasing clicks, and we're not chasing AdSense revenue of making a couple £100 here, there and everywhere. That's not what it's about. And I don't think you should dilute what you're doing. I don't think you will. And chopping it down to a Tim Mosso 60-second review, that doesn't work when it's the type of watches that you look at. That works if it's a Rolex where people have got a background knowledge, they've seen the models before, and perhaps it's a new colorway or an iteration. But for what you do, it's the story, it's the hunt. It's almost like the jumble sale of trying to find these inexpensive watches, the gold that's kind of in there, the wheat amongst the chaff. And that is why people always come back and watch your videos.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. I think it's something I'll look at maybe trying to do in parallel. But yeah, you can't cut a 15-minute, you can't cut a 1-hour podcast into 5 minutes. I can't cut a 10-minute video into 1 minute. So there's no point chasing something that I would need to do that in parallel with, rather than as an alternative to, or repurposing. You can't repurpose your content. But no, I'm really happy. The channel has been steady for me for a number of years now. I've got a lot of people who watch my videos regularly, and I'm so appreciative of them, and I can't forget that they watch for a certain type of content. So I'll be keep on making that type of content. That's what I enjoy anyway.
I'm glad to hear it. So if you want to check out what Jody's up to, where should they look, Jody?
Oh, they should look at www.youtube.com/c/just1more-watch, which is my custom URL. So Just One More Watch on YouTube and Just One More Watch on Instagram. And there is a one-page landing page, justonmorewatch.com. You can leave me your email address there, and you'll be the first to know about my new watch brand when it launches in a couple of months' time.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to you coming across as well, because we've never met. We've chatted for, as I said, before the podcast even came out.
Years and years now.
It must be at least 6 years that we've been chatting back and forward through, I think it was Facebook initially that we were actually communicating. But no, it's been a great journey watching you grow, watching everything you do, and the fact that you're moving to 4K, you've got this macro camera. It's going to add. You didn't need it. You're the kind of guy with the animation that you've got, and the love and the passion that after so many years, so many hundreds of videos still remains, that you could be recording it on an iPhone and people wouldn't care. They tune in because it's great content. And the fact that it's going to be even better on a large television or a projector on a wall, that just adds to the whole package. So really looking forward to that. Looking forward to meeting you in real life, and looking forward to seeing your new watch. And if you're looking forward to what we're up to next, follow us on Instagram at Scottish Watches. We've got a website as well. It's got more than one page, funnily enough. It's got thousands of pages, because every time there's a podcast, there's a show notes page. You should be playing along at home if you want to see pictures, links, videos, all the technical spec of the watches that we've discussed on the show, and links to Jody's videos, including his recent ones and some of his amazing AliExpress videos from the past that I still love. Loom Wars, all these things. Some of the things that Jody says when he's reviewing a watch, he doesn't hold back. He pulls no punches. He really tells it like it is. And I know that really upsets certain brands, but you know what? If it's not right, it's not right. And you can always trust Jody to tell you the truth. So he's a trustworthy dude. And I would definitely invest $299 in his pyramid scheme. So there we go. That's the end of our show. Jody, thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you guys again soon.
Always a pleasure. I feel like I got off lightly today, Ricky. Thank you very much. I'll see you in a year.